Sonic Frontiers is such a frustrating game to review. It starts off incredibly promising, but I won't lie, I was incredibly disappointed with my time playing Sonic Frontiers. I'll admit I was cautiously optimistic when the game was first announced. The trailers looked good, the marketing was great, they showed off a lot of new features for the series, but I was initially turned off by the announcement of it being open world. But when they clarified that the game was actually going to be open zone, not open world, which to me is a significant difference, I was willing to check it out. Then the game came out, and Sonic fans on social media and user reviews were praising it as the best Sonic game in years and the savior of the franchise. But I seriously want to know what Sonic Frontiers that you all played, because I want to play that game. Because if I had to sum up Sonic Frontiers that I played in one sentence, it would be a slow, tedious, frustrating slog. Now I want to say up front, I am a Sonic fan. I did not come into this game looking to or expecting to hate it. I came in expecting and wanting to love it. But I didn't love it, and I'm not going to pretend that this is a great game just because I wanted it to be a great game. And I genuinely don't see how anybody could find it to be the savior of the franchise. There were certainly elements I liked, don't get me wrong, but so much of the excitement and fun that I had during the early parts of the game just wear off, and it leaves an experience that feels like empty, busy work, a chore to play. Now I played the game on Switch, so I understand that it's graphically inferior to other versions and it's only capped at 30 frames per second. But I personally think that the game actually looks and performs fine despite all this. It's 30 frames per second, but it's a solid 30 frames per second. It's not stuttery or plagued by performance issues, and I think it looks good, even on the Switch. So actually big props to Sonic Team for that. From a technical standpoint, the game plays great. There's some occasional pop-ins with background things like grass or flowers, but that honestly doesn't bother me that much. I also really like that there are a lot of options available to the player to customize the gameplay experience. You can remove motion blur, set camera distance, even set start speed and acceleration speed. So you can start running at max speed on a standstill if you wanted to. You can tweak the controls and feel the game to give you a better experience, which is awesome. The music is also pretty good, especially the cyberspace level music, which makes me feel like I'm at a rave in an anime convention, though none of the music hits as hard as His World, Escape from the City, or I Am All of Me. But my issues with the game are more of how it's designed and how it feels to play. Not everything about it is bad, like I said, I enjoy elements of it, especially starting off. I found the first couple islands genuinely fun and full of potential. I was excited, but by the end, I couldn't wait for the game to be over, and that's just not a good feeling. Sonic Frontiers cannot decide what kind of game it wants to be. Is it a fast platformer? Is it a Devil May Cry style action game? Is it a Collectathon? Is it Shadow of the Colossus? Is it an Ubisoft style open world outpost sim? Is it a modern AAA RPG light game? Sonic Frontiers tries to be all of these, but doesn't feel deep enough to succeed at being any of them. So let's break it down, starting with the story because I have the least to say about it. Sonic Frontiers opens with Eggman opening some sort of rift into a cyberspace wormhole. Sonic, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles are all sucked into the wormhole, which teleports them to this mysterious island inhabited with these ancient runes and small creatures called Cocos. Sonic was the only one able to arrive unscathed, as Amy, Tails, and Knuckles are stuck in a limbo state between cyberspace and the real world. So Sonic needs to find a way to get them out of limbo. Meanwhile, Eggman's new AI creation, Sage, is working to stop Sonic before these Titan monsters destroy the world. Along the way, Sonic discovers that the Cocos and the ruins that he's been exploring are tied to an ancient race that all look like Chaos from Sonic Adventure that built their memories into cyberspace. Sonic must use the Chaos Emeralds to stop these giant Titans, while also exploring the origins of the Ancients and the Chaos Emeralds. The game has a few subtle references to past Sonic adventures, but Sonic Frontiers feels wholly standalone in its narrative. Personally speaking, I wasn't super invested in the story. It was a definite slow burn until the climax at the very end. I'm also not really into this version of Sonic. He's portrayed as more mature, less crude. He lacks the cool factor that makes Sonic so appealing to me as a character. I don't want to blame the voice actor, but his delivery felt very subdued to me. I also still think of Ryan Drummond's and Jason Griffith's version of the character when it comes to how I hear Sonic's voice in my head. A lot of Sonic's angst and attitude is just missing in this version. He's quiet and reserved, and it just results in a bland and emotionless take on the character. Mix that with cutscenes where characters are just standing around talking to each other, and I was just not invested in what was going on narratively.
What is your end goal?
It varies. Sometimes it's a spinning sign, sometimes it's a big old ring. So, that was a thing.
On the flip side though, I loved Eggman's performance in this game. Him and his interactions with Sage are honestly the most interesting parts of the story to me, which unfortunately is the smallest part of the story.
Action is to create an alliance with Sonic.
What?
But together you stopped the Ark, overcame Neo Metal. You...
I don't want to hear it. Those alliances were purely out of desperation.
But time is running out.
I don't want to hear it. Find me another option.
So, that was a thing.
But, as always, I'm always more interested in gameplay anyways. Sonic Frontiers is a weird mishmash of different game elements, and at first, all of these things do feel somewhat fresh for the Sonic formula. I really want to emphasize how positive I felt about my experience when first starting the game, but every element of this game overstays its welcome. Every element feels underdeveloped, and by the end of the game, I just wanted it to be over with. I really hate saying that, but as I said in the beginning of the video, the entire game can be summed up in a single word: tedious. It's a burst of excitement that fizzles out. Honestly, the game length should have been halved, and maybe it wouldn't have felt so tedious and bloated. There are like 5 different main parts to Sonic Frontiers' design: combat, platforming and cyberspace missions, the open world, collectathon and light RPG mechanics, and boss battles. First up, combat. You still have your homing attack or can jump on enemies just like in classic Sonic, but there's also an attempt at an actual combat system. You have basic punching kicking combo attacks, which when mashed increases a combo bar, which when filled allows Sonic to use a fast moving shadow punch attack. There's this new loop ability, which lets you interact with objects around the world, but you can also use it to break shields and stun enemies. There are also basic combo inputs that execute stylish moves, like quick dash attacks, or firing balls of energy, or spinning into an enemy like a saw. There's also a parry, which doesn't actually require any timing to pull off. You just hold down R and L and wait for an enemy to attack, and you pull off a parry. Finally, a parry system that even I can pull off flawlessly. Parrying can deflect range attacks or prep an enemy for a special move. I actually think it's kind of stupid that you don't need to time anything for parrying. It removes a lot of challenge from the game. It's also hilarious because it just locks Sonic in place. You can literally fly in the air while holding parry. Different enemies require different moves and strategies to defeat, and defeating them awards you with XP points that you can then use to unlock new special moves to add to your combo ability. It's all incredibly flashy, Sonic spins all over the place, teleports around punching, and it's fun. For a while. Now, I don't expect Sonic to have Devil May Cry style combat, but at the end of the day, the combat in Sonic Frontiers boils down to mashing Y and pressing B, or holding LZ. There just isn't enough to the combat. It's incredibly simplistic for the type of combat that this game was going for. And since the inputs for all the different special moves are so similar and so simplistic, you end up using the wrong special moves all the time. The mini-bosses are marginally more interesting to fight. This is where the Sonic of the Colossus jokes stem from, as a lot of these are enormous enemies. They require a bit more thought and skill to fight, and defeating them rewards you with a gear used to unlock extra missions instead of just experience points. Some you need to run up their bodies to find their weak points to attack. Others you need to grind on these rails, highlighting areas of the rail until the monster is weakened so that you can get your hits in. Some see you running along runways to reach its weak points as you dodge incoming projectiles. My favorite mini-boss was this one where you have to kind of bounce around in a ring to do damage to him. It kind of reminded me of the pinball motif that Sonic sometimes has. But after a while, I just found myself avoiding all enemies altogether because I didn't want to put up with fighting. It becomes tedious. Basic enemies are repetitive, and mini-bosses just take too much time away from your objectives. This is compounded by the fact that the incentive to gauge with the combat disappears by the third island. I completely maxed out my moves by the third island. I had no use for XP anymore, and therefore no reason to engage with fighting basic enemies beyond just wanting to fight or because the game would lock me into combat encounters. And most of the time, I was focused on getting to my next objective, so I didn't want to engage in combat. It became an annoying distraction instead of something that I wanted to participate in. Another chore tacked onto a list of chores. Thankfully, combat isn't all the game had going for it. This is Sonic, so of course there is fast-paced platforming, which was definitely my favorite element of Sonic Frontiers. It keeps the platforming elements that the series is known for. Fast-paced running, bounce pads, grinding on rails, swings, we have your homing attack, which also helps with platforming, the coin light dash from Sonic Adventure returns, even the drop dash from Sonic Mania is in this game. Curiously though, Sonic's spin dash doesn't make an appearance. Instead, you have a boost which makes you run faster like in Sonic Forces. The platforming is emphasized in the cyberspace side missions, which is actually the part of the game I was most looking forward to. As I've said before, I don't find that most traditionally linear or semi-linear games translate well into an open world. Sonic games traditionally are known for their creative, handmade, personally designed levels, which is why I was most excited for the cyberspace missions. Even before the game was released, I viewed them as a potential reprieve. Even if I hated the open world, at least I would have some linear cyberspace missions to look forward to. And while they're far from perfect, I would say I overall enjoyed these missions. Don't go in expecting Sonic Adventure tiered level design, they're more similar to how levels in Sonic Forces feel, but they do actually require you to do some platforming instead of just holding dash the entire time. Every cyberspace level has a list of tasks to complete. These tasks include simply finish the level, find all red coins, complete the level with a set amount of coins, and finish the level in a set amount of time. These levels are short, designed to be beaten in only a couple of minutes to S rank, and it's possible to complete all of these challenges in one go, though I usually found myself replaying them multiple times to finish with S ranks, which can get really frustrating at times, shooting for some of the faster timed S ranks. The times are really strict, and making a small mistake will often cost you an S rank finish. The multi-path design Sonic is known for is presented and accounted for here, rewarding skilled movement and knowledge of the level with faster completion times, and rewarding repeat playthroughs with fresh paths. It does feel a little hard to control at times, and I did find myself flying off in directions I didn't want to go to, or off of cliffs, but this is an issue that all 3D Sonic games have, and you just kind of have to get used to it. I wish the cyberspace levels were longer, and that there were more classic feeling 2D levels here and there, but they were definitely the highlight of the game for me. But the majority of the game is open world, so all of these traversal and platforming mechanics carry over there too, but they are stretched out over large areas of open map, with floating platforms and bounce pads and grind rails to be found littering the world as you go around. They do spice up traveling a bit for sure. Rings are found throughout these platforming paths, usually with an upgrade item or a story key at the end of them. You can perform tricks off of ramps to get experience points, but they can also just take you out of your intended way when traveling to objectives. And it's really annoying that they lock you into the 2D platforming areas. You can't get unstuck. I just want to go behind this. Let me out. When it came to start doing main objectives, I, like the combat, just found myself ignoring the main areas and would just run around to the objectives. Platforming became a tedious distraction that I didn't feel a need to engage with. The open world is just huge, and running from point A to point B instead of taking a long detour through floating platforms just felt like a better route most of the time, making something that I did genuinely enjoy into yet another chore, a victim of the huge open empty design. Speaking of, the open world is pretty much from what you'd expect from a modern open world game. It's empty, it's lifeless, it basically just adds travel time padding in between objectives. I have the same complaints about Sonic Frontiers open world that I did for God of War 2018 and Halo Infinite. There aren't really NPCs other than a very small handful with specific tasks to talk to, and they just stand around in one place. Characters aren't moving around and interacting with one another, there's no bustling cities or villages full of people doing things, or interesting events occurring in the background. It's a huge, flat field. You run from point A to point B to get the plot forward. There is nothing to justify the open world's existence. No immersion, no sandbox element. I'm actually in the middle of another open world game right now, and it's insane how that game is able to make an open world that feels lived in, interesting, and fun. It's a rare feat, and it just makes Sonic Frontiers open world feel that much more lifeless as I'm thinking about it now. The open world mission design feels like busy work, not much different from Ubisoft's Outpost design that is so often criticized in the discussion of today's open world designs. Run here, put a gear in the totem to unlock a cyberspace level, run there, talk to a friend, run there, find a Chaos Emerald. Rinse and repeat with an occasional combat encounter or platforming run in between. There are various objectives and puzzles laying around in the open world. The purpose of these objectives is to open up unexplored areas of the map and award you with upgrade orbs. These tasks are laughably easy for the most part. Hit some balls through a ring, run on a hamster wheel, deflect a missile with that parrying that requires no timing. One objective is to jump rope, which is actually fine on its own until you realize you can just hold your parry and float in the air to avoid needing to jump at all. They just don't provide any challenge, and many of them just don't feel interesting enough to justify how many of these challenges there are. It's busy work. That said, I actually did like these puzzles where you need to follow a path, hitting all of these highlighted blocks without stepping off of the path. They actually required some thinking as you walked the path to ensure that you were going to hit all the blocks on the path. You'll also notice that I'm referring to Sonic Frontiers as open world, not open zone, because it does feel like an open world game, not an open zone game. Open zone, to me, implies smaller sections with unique mechanics that encourage exploration for a smaller set of objects or points of interest. It's more than just a scope thing to me. Open zone makes it feel like each zone will feel distinct from one another. Sonic Frontiers is really a collection of multiple open worlds. They don't feel distinct. The collectibles are all the same. The tasks are all the same. And the way that you achieve those tasks are all the same. None of the open zones feel remotely different from one another, other than subtle visual aesthetic. You're still doing the exact same thing across all of them. Even the ancient challenges are the same across every island. And I don't want to hear, well, this is the first time a Sonic game has tried this sort of thing, as an excuse for delivering an empty, tedious open world experience. You know what has been doing open zone design for decades now? Since its first foray into 3D? Sonic's very own rival, Mario. This is open zone design. Mario nailed it with its first try with Mario 64. Every level acted as an open environment for you to platform around and perform various tasks to earn stars. Each level was unique. Each level offered new challenges, new enemies, new platforming mechanics, and variations on things to provide a fulfilling, fun, and varied experience that doesn't get tedious. And Nintendo built on that with Mario Odyssey, making the open zones larger and more interesting, with challenge dungeons to explore and varied mobility options. Open zone design works best when the open zones function like non-linear levels, more so than just a collection of smaller open worlds. Sonic Frontiers should have been Sonic's Mario Odyssey, because this is well designed, varied, and fun, and this is empty, lifeless, boring, and tedious to explore. A huge source of the open world's tedium comes from that collectathon element. Now, I love collectathons in general. It's one of my all-time favorite genres. I do not find collectathons in general tedious, just the way that it was implemented in Sonic Frontiers. In Sonic Frontiers, you can collect rings. These act as both your health, and when completely filled up, allow you to run faster. Red and green orbs, collecting these unlocks upgrades for attack and defense. Cocos, collecting these upgrade either your speed or your ring capacity. Character-specific tokens, these are used to progress dialogue with either Tails, Amy, Knuckles, depending on the island, and Sage. Gears, these unlock cyberspace levels, and keys, these unlock Chaos Emeralds. In general, platforming awards you with rings, tokens, and orbs. Gears were given for defeating mini-bosses, Cocos were found in the open world, and keys were given for completing cyberspace missions. On paper, it works. On paper, there's plenty of incentive to engage with all of these different systems, to collect all these things and level up and fight mini-bosses and whatever. It creates a gameplay loop. Explore the open world to level up, defeat enemies to unlock cyberspace missions, complete cyberspace missions to get Chaos Emeralds to complete the story. But like everything in this game, it's fumbled in its execution. On top of the tedium that I've already mentioned about the combat and the open world platforming and exploration, the game sabotages its own systems in fairly odd ways. The first way is how you upgrade your stats themselves. So like I said, to upgrade your stats you either need red or green orbs for attack and defense, or Cocos for speed and ring total. The red and green orbs are fine. Get the orbs, bring them to the Hermit Coco who gives you the upgrades, and you're on your way. But upgrading with Cocos is awful. Look how fucking long it takes to upgrade bringing the Cocos to the Elder Coco. Why the fuck was this designed this way? Why can't I just give all my Cocos at once, or allocate a set number for each upgrade? You have to do each one individually, over and over and over. So tedious. It's awful. And really made me not want to collect Cocos or upgrade this shit, because every time I wanted to do it, it would take me 15 minutes to finish. It's so bad. So then there's the loop mechanic. So the loop is primarily used to engage with things in the open world and break enemies' shields. But it also gives you rings. Every time you make a loop, you get rings. So you can very easily spend 30 seconds making loops and max your ring count from 0. This eliminates any and all incentive for platforming or exploring for rings. It also eliminates any incentive to do well in combat, because refilling rings that you lose for getting hit is just a loop away. As for the other collectibles, let me introduce you to Big the Cat. Oh yeah, Big the Cat is back and he brings a fishing minigame with him. Now, I actually like this fishing minigame. It's incredibly simple, but it's relaxing, and I kind of like seeing all the different fish that you catch. The problem is that you can rack up currency while fishing that lets you get a shit ton of collectibles. To balance this, you can only fish when you have fishing tokens, which you can also collect in the open world, but periodically at night, stars will rain from the sky. Collecting falling stars starts a slot machine, which awards you with a bunch of fishing tokens. So you can go and fish for like 20 minutes and stock up on all of the different collectibles, which makes running around the open world completely pointless. Why the fuck would I waste my time running around an empty, lifeless open world when I can just spend 20 minutes fishing and stocking up on things? It's sabotaging to the intention of the open world, but my god, is a beautiful time saver. So what we're left with is an empty open world with simplistic combat and no incentive to spend time engaging with that open world platforming for items and upgrades, which are a tedious chore to collect anyway. Hell, you don't even keep the Chaos Emeralds, because they're just used to fight the boss on each island, and then you need to go and get them again, to repeat the same exact tasks that you just completed on the island before. So, boss fights, the last thing I need to talk about. Boss fights are essentially big set-piece sections filled with QTEs. It's baffling to me that every boss is like this. I get that you have the Chaos Emeralds, so you're supersonic, and you're flying around, but these bosses do not test your skills that you've learned while playing the rest of the game. They're so detached from everything else that you're doing. They're chaotic to a fault. Like, what the fuck is going on here? It's definitely visually exciting, then the metal music is high energy and it gives off a great feeling flying around as supersonic, but there's not anything else to these boss fights. You basically just hold up on the stick to get close to the boss, and then mash your attack button, or hold an occasional parry. They're so uninteresting mechanically. Spoiler for those who care, skip to the next timecode to avoid a spoiler about the final boss. So in order to fight the actual final boss, you need to beat the game on hard mode. Doing so brings you to a secret boss, which is a shoot 'em up section. So the final boss of a Sonic game is a shmup. And it's fun, outside of being really challenging and having no checkpoints, so if you die you need to start the whole 10-minute boss fight over again, but still, it's fun. Though it's definitely an odd choice for a Sonic game's final boss, especially a Sonic game that attempts a combo-based combat system. It's so weird to me. The game also just ends when you finish the final boss. You don't get brought back into the open world to finish finding your collectibles. You're not rewarded with any new cosmetic items, which is weird because, as I've said already, there are optional cosmetics in this game. You don't get a new game plus or new challenge levels unlocked or anything. You can reload your last save to replay through the final boss and I guess find any collectibles that you miss, but I had already 100%ed every island prior to finishing the final boss, so reloading that save just felt unnecessary to me. It truly does just feel like a fizzle out ending to me. So, that's Sonic Frontiers, a game with mixed potential that ultimately ends up as a tedious slog. I do think the experience kind of peaks during the second island, and I did genuinely enjoy my time during the second island. I feel like the open world platforming was still engaging and fun at this point, the combat encounters were still rewarding, and I did enjoy some of the puzzles and side quests during this part, even if they were a little bit simple. I hope that Sonic Team drops the open world for future games because it is not a good inclusion. I play Sonic for the platforming and levels. A good combat system can be included for sure, but I want to see more of what makes Sonic great. I don't need another 2D Sonic Mania experience, but I sincerely think it's time for another adventure-style Sonic game. Or take notes from Mario and give us an actual Collectathon experience with creative level design, akin to Mario Odyssey. I know it will work. We've had indies carrying that torch for a while now. It's time for Sonic to return to glory, and unfortunately, Frontiers was just not that return. As always, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, it helps the channel out a lot. Let me know what you thought of Sonic Frontiers. I know a lot of people like this game. Let me know if you disagree with me, for sure. We can talk about it in the comments. Have a good one. Bye.